What's up, knife freaks, sharpness geeks, and purveyors of stabbing goodness? Welcome to the Knife Freak Show. My name is Jonathan McNeese. This is my co-host, Mr. Chase Boatwright.
Good morning, Juarez family. How you doing?
I am doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm good. A little sniffly. All of a sudden, I got attacked by some sort of sinus infection last night, but other than that, pretty good. So I apologize if there's sniffling, coughing, or sneezing.
Well, it's not in person, so it's just not as bad.
Yeah, well, just
we
for
don't have to
the
worry about
listeners.
getting any germs. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So, how'd your week in the shop go?
Pretty good. This week I pretty much started prepping for Blade Show already. So I don't know
saw
if I've
that.
mentioned it on here, but I will not be reattending Blade Show Texas this year. Just made the decision that it was too far and the schedule didn't quite line up to where I wanted it to, because I'm taking another trip out to Las Vegas to go see some family in February. So, and that was going to be right up against the March Texas show. So I decided just to kind of opt out of it this year. So I'm just doing Atlanta this year. But I like to go ahead and kind of get ahead of it. I try to as much as possible. I still end up always bringing it down to the wire somehow, but I try.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was mostly cutting out stuff and, flattening and spotting holes and drilling holes and, a whole lot of boring stuff really. But it's all, it makes you feel like you've got a lot done when you see, okay, I've cut out 12 blades and I've, okay, now I've flattened 12 blades and now I've, drilled 12 blades. It helps a little bit to feel like you're ahead of yourself. And I think that's why I get in trouble. It's like, oh, I'm good. I've already got a head start. Like, I'll go work on some other stuff. And then all of a sudden I've got a month to finish all these blades that I started in January or December. So
Yeah.
How did your week go?
Our week was pretty good.
Well, I guess
Trying
2
to
weeks
think.
actually, but
Yeah, it's technically been 2 weeks. Yeah, since we missed a week there. Holidays and stuff got us a little out of whack, but yeah, it's been good. We've got, one of the latest things I talked about was getting another machine, and I was getting it set up to mostly run fixed blades. We've got multiple different fixed blade models running on it now. And just so everybody understands, so when I say that we're running fixed blades on the machine, so the fixed blades they get cut out at Waterjet. They come to us as a blank. We surface grind them down to size. Once they're surface ground, they go on the CNC mill. On the mill, is not actually a ton of work goes on the mill. They basically get profiled. They get the we got the Vanna White thing going on here. They get
I was profiling,
yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. They're getting for those of you that are just listening and not watching on YouTube. Chase is giving some showing some things here as I'm talking. So yeah, they get profiled. They get any holes that they need to put in the handle, which pretty much we already have the holes for the fasteners Waterjet in there, because they don't have to be a super specific size. Like it's Waterjet can cut them close enough for a through hole. So we do put holes in them. Yeah. We drill holes in them on op 1 to put for locating pins for when we flip them over for op 2, so that they're precisely located. So it's basically profiling, chamfering the edges on the ones that get chamfering, which is pretty much all of them at this point, and then putting the holes in there for op 2, and then on op 2 they just flip over and basically get the chamfering done on the other side and the tab cut off or whatever. So it's not a ton. That does not mean that just because we're running a bunch of different models on the mill does not mean we're like a week away from having 2 or 3 different models about to hit the website, unfortunately, because from there, then they still have to go to heat treat, and what we've been doing is sending a small batch of fixed blades every week. We're on a schedule where every week we send off a certain amount of folder blades, basically a week's worth of folder blades. Well, a week's worth with a little bit of padding, and typically goes to heat treat every week, so that at this point, more or less every week, depending on the heat treater schedule. We get back an order just about every week. And so the last several weeks, we've been sending a small batch of fixed blades with the folder blades. So we're getting in a rhythm where we'll start to get those back. And once they come back, then we have to find time to stop grinding folder blades long enough to put them on the mill and grind the bevels. In the meantime, we have handles being run on our little mini mill, which we talked about, I think, a little bit last week, and I failed to get a video up yet of that on YouTube, but I will. So it can be sitting there running handles pretty much all the time. So we kind of try to stay stocked up on handles from it, so that once the blades come off the grinder, once they've been ground on the CNC mill, then we basically just have to do the finish work on them and put the handles on them, and then once we get rolling, I'll have sheaths in stock for each model that are coming from. We're outsourcing right now. We've got the guys from Texas Holster Solutions are making our Kydex sheaths for us, but we're fixing to branch out into some probably some leather and stuff too. So anyway, I kind of end up diving into the whole fixed blade workflow there. But hey, what's a podcast without a rabbit hole?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the people like to hear things like that. I don't know, but I find it interesting because like it's simple in terms of make one, but okay, make 1,200 or whatever you're making. Yeah. Like that's different. Like
yep, systems become extremely important. Like having a steady, and that's something we have really learned this year, is to develop systems and get a rhythm going, because otherwise it's just complete chaos every week. And it's still, there's always enough variables that jump in there and mess you up that create chaos without having it, right off the bat. So yeah, we're running at least 3 different models of fixed. We've been running like 3 different models of fixed blades the last 2 weeks on the mill. So yeah, we've got quite a few things coming. I just didn't want to give the impression that like next week we were going to have, some, although the first ones that are coming back from heat treat, we should actually start having some fixed blades probably before the end of the year. We should have probably at least a couple of different models. We've already talked about it on Instagram. So Ridge Runner is one of them. The Ridge Runner is coming back with our new high performance hollow grinds on them. And this, at least for this batch, I'm going to try them and see how I like them. I went a little bit thinner overall too. Like the stock is thinner. It's like nice. 1/8-inch stock. So nice. Yeah, it's I think the original ones were like 135. These are like 125. So it's not a huge difference, but did make them just a little bit thinner. Between that and that hollow grind, they should be some heavy duty slicers. So should be great.
I'm excited to see that with a hollow grind.
Yeah, I am too. We haven't actually. We're waiting on blanks. No, I lied. We have blanks. We've been waiting on the time to make the new Tombstone pallet to be able to grind them, which hopefully we can do this week. Which brings me to something else we've been doing the last 2 weeks, which is getting ready to start running more 3-inch Mac 2s, which are, as some of you know, I know Chase knows, that was the original size. So part of doing that, which we've been just over the last 2 to 3 days kind of diving into, is we had to do the same process with the fixed blades. Basically, like I said, we had to make a new Tombstone to put them on, to grind them on, and then we had to proof out the grinding program, and we're pretty close. This one's not dead perfect, but I mean, from what you can tell on this is more or less what it'll look like. So nice, pretty tall, and you can't really tell on here, but that's a pretty deep hollow grind, just like it is on the Dixons. Yeah. So they're going to be very slicey. So we'll be starting to build those this coming week, because we're starting to get some off the grinder, the CNC that does the grinding. They're starting, which is the last step kind of before finishing and assembly. Yeah. So super excited about that, because I don't think we've run those in like 2 years, maybe more. It's been a while.
It's been a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been at least 2 years since we've been able to offer them. So really excited about that. But yeah, other than that, We're still cranking out Dixons. We're going to still keep building Dixons, just smaller volume. We're going to take part of that capacity and build 3-inch Mac 2s instead. So we'll be running a kind of a combination of both, and some fixed blades thrown in there. So yeah, it's been a pretty good. But we did have one nice little thing that happened this week. Speaking of chaos, it wasn't terrible. In the end, it worked out fine. But I was at lunch, actually about to work out, and which we usually work out. Amy and I usually work out at lunch. So one of my guys texted me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to come deadlift this surface grinder back up on its blocks?" I was like, "Oh my god!"
What?
So I go out there. So here's the full story. I bought the surface grinder used, and the surface grinder has bolts that go through the base of it that are essentially the feet of it, and that's how you level it. But it's supposed to sit on these little like just metal pads. When you buy them new from Okamoto, they come with like a little hockey puck. It looks just like a hockey puck with like a dimple in it, like a countersink in it, and that's what the point of that bolt, the tip of that bolt's kind of tapered a little bit, and it fits down in that, so it basically cannot fall off of it. Well, when we bought that machine used, that was the first machine that needed anything like that I'd ever bought, because all the new the Haas, they come with feet on, whatever. So anyway, I had no idea, and we got here to get it. The guys riggers were here to set it up, and it did not have any kind of little pucks or whatever to set it on. So we cut up some steel that we had and set it on those, but they were too small, and they did not have any kind of counterbore or anything on there to keep them from sliding off of it. And so we had gotten lucky, and it had stayed on them for however long we've had that surface grinder, I guess about a year. And maybe a little longer. And it finally wiggled itself off of one of them, in one corner of it. I mean, the blocks are only like an inch thick, so it's not like it, the whole thing didn't topple over. But the guy standing beside it, Porter, that was running the it and the double disc, and him standing right beside the double disc when it came off there and thudded on the floor and kind of shook the floor a little bit. I think it gave him a little. He didn't have to go home and change pants or anything, but I think it gave him a little fright.
I think I would have. Yeah, that's scary.
So,
I mean, I'm about to jump out of my skin anytime a belt breaks and it's on the grinder. That's the worst. Terrifying, because all of a sudden something pops and whatever you're doing is not working anymore, and things are still spinning. And
it's chaos.
Was the machine running?
So, yes, it was running. Okay. Which is what that table going back and forth. There's some force there. It's not like it's slamming hard. But it does create some back and forth force as it hits the stop on both ends, and so it just finally had moved itself over that year and a half, however long we've had it. It had just finally scooched itself enough that it slipped off the edge. So we didn't end up being that big a deal. I was actually able to. I knew I could just made some. If I'd had some good material on hand to make it out of, I could have just made the little like hockey pucks or whatever. But then I got to take time out to model it up, program it, all that, take machine time from something else. So I just contacted Okamoto, and they had some that I could just buy from them. They weren't cheap. And just so you guys know, I mean, I don't usually talk about, expenses that much, but it's 5 little, basically like a little 1-inch tall metal, literally like a hockey puck. It's about the same size as a hockey puck with a countersink in it. And 5 of those babies cost me over $600. So, plus overnight shipping on top of that, because, we needed the machine back up and running. So in the grand scheme of things, it probably would have cost me that much and lost time and all that to machine them myself. So it was worth it. But, just so you guys know, when we talk about extra expenses and all that, and you wonder why stuff costs what it does, a business has to be able to absorb those kind of costs. Like we've talked about this before. I know, you got to be able to absorb costs on things like that, because if you're making a super bare minimum profit on your product and you're barely making enough to cover the expenses of when everything goes right, when something goes wrong, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So
Murphy's Law will persist.
Yep. So anyway, so that was a little exciting, but it worked out great. We were able to, I think it was down for about a day and a half, maybe 2 days total. Super lucky. My guy that kind of runs the crew for the rigging company that we use is one of my neighbors. Lives just right down the road from me. Actually, his son works for us now part time, and so I set him up, and I was like, and it ended up being just basically a one man job. He came and knocked it out for us, and brought his precision level and got it all leveled back up and all that. And so it was we were down a very minimal amount of time with it, but it was a little bit of excitement there for a minute. But thankfully nothing too bad. So no, one of those no harm, no foul. Lost a little bit of time on the surface grinder, but that was about it. So
yeah, and I think that's a good point about like buying the thing and just going ahead and being done with it versus like like you said, it's going to take your time, it's going to take the machine time, it's going to take material, and what if you don't get it right? Now you got more machine time, more of your time, like are we going to compound the problem by trying to fix it, or can we just, or is it and in reality, it's a fairly simple fix, but trying to do it, like, making sure it's right the first time and not having to do it in 3 months again, or, in another year, like have to make more or whatever, like just go ahead and let's kill that problem and move on. And, there is a point where it makes sense to, well, I know you're very, like you said, DIY. You're very, how can I fix this myself? And you always, what I understand, have been going back to the Franken grinder and all that. But, I think there does come a point when you're running, something like that where it's like, okay, let's just bite the bullet and do the thing. And,
and that's something I've had to kind of mature on as a business person. I've had to realize that, just because I can doesn't mean I should. It's, while yes, it would be cool to say, oh yeah, we just machined our own little things for it. I mean, they were super simple. And to be totally honest with you, like if I had the capability to like 3D print metal, which I really would like to have one of these days, like if I could have 3D printed something because to model it up and design it would have probably taken me 10 minutes or less. If I could have done that and then, just print it out and boom, there it is, I'd have done it all day long. But to have to stop and, and to do it, we would have had to we don't keep a vise in any of the machines right now because they all run on pallets. We've got a vise on a pallet, but then it's just a whole, like, it's just, like you said, it would have cost us more in lost time. Now if we had somebody sitting there not doing anything and a machine not doing anything and, we've got the time and all that to do it, it's one thing, but when you're having to stop something else to do this instead, it's just, it's not, it's just not worth it in a case like that. I mean, there's a point there, where you got to weigh, okay, is what this is going to cost me more or less than, if it's going to take me 2 hours to do this, is what it costs worth more or less than 2 hours of time between personnel and machines, and then you just make a judgment call on that. So, but all fixed now, surface grinder's back up and running. And as far as I know, all is well on all that. Hopefully nothing else will be falling over anytime soon. I think it was the only one that was kind of on a, quick redneck rigged kind of deal, which in retrospect, what we should have done is the whole advice and stuff you were saying there when the guys came, but I didn't realize until the riggers were there to set the thing up, because they got there, the machine gets delivered, and the riggers show up here, take it off the truck. So I had no idea it didn't have something to set it on, and they're already here. We need to do something with it. They would have had to make another trip back out there to finish setting it up. And so, there really wasn't time, but ideally we would have set it up correctly the first time. And, it might have been better if I'd have just waited, had them come back a second day after we could get the correct pads for it. But either way, we ground on it for a while before it.
On another note, we have been doing this for basically an entire year now.
Wow.
We started last year our first episode was December 9th of 2024, and on the day this is going to come out on December 8th, so close as we can get. But yeah, we've been doing this thing for a whole year now.
That's wild.
Yeah, doesn't feel like it. I don't know if we've got better. I hope we have, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it. But
well,
yeah, from introductions to torches and tranny fluid, that's basically a whole year.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It doesn't seem like a year in a way. It's just like everything else. On one hand, it seems like we've been doing it. That's a long time ago since the first episode, but then it also seems like it's been, we just started. So
yeah, very much
pretty
so.
cool.
I mean, same thing with, I guess, it doesn't feel like I've been making knives for 5 years or however long it's been now. It's almost 6 years now. But I look at the time and I guess it went away somehow. So, but yeah. So we just kind of wanted to say thank you guys for supporting us for all this, for this entire year, and for everybody who's been here from the beginning, and for everybody we picked up along the way. Wanted to say thank you, and we appreciate it greatly.
Yes, we do. We probably would have already given up on this if it hadn't been for all the good feedback that we get from you guys. as far as like I said, I feel like I see it a good bit in the comments and stuff. We do get good comments on YouTube and stuff on, great episode, keep it up, whatever, which you don't always have to say good stuff. It can be negative too, guys, if we screwed something up or if we sounded crazy, but we appreciate the feedback, period. And I always get just tons of feedback. I feel like it shows, like it's crazy how many people come up, and sometimes it's people I know. And sometimes it's just random people, that just for whatever reason I would have, just somebody walking up, I would never guess that they're listening to the podcast, but then they're like, oh man, I listen to the podcast every week. And it's like, it's kind of crazy to see that, but it's really cool to get that feedback. So, I like
always,
you said, hopefully.
Go ahead. I always see it whenever, at shows as well, but also like on a Monday, if we don't record or if we're a little late on posting it or whatever, I'll get messages or emails being like, yo, what's up, man? You're messing with my routine. They're usually nicer than that. They always are, actually.
Right.
But, that's where I I'm like, sorry, I didn't mean to. We're trying, But it is cool to see that people are enjoying it and people have sort of incorporated it into their routine and enjoy listening to it. Very
cool. And we greatly appreciate it, and continue to bear with us, guys, because we're not professional podcasters. We're dudes. We're knife makers that are just like to get on here and talk about knives and stuff and share some stuff with you guys. So bear with us. If it's not the best quality and or we're running a little late or we have to miss an episode or whatever, because this isn't actually our job. We actually other than helping to bring awareness to our names, our brand, we don't make a single dime off of this. So we don't have it monetized in any way. So just bear with us. But
for sure,
greatly appreciate that we've been able to get on here without being booed off the air, I guess, for a whole year here.
Yeah, it's definitely people wanting to listen to us ramble about nonsense and rant about stuff and all that. Didn't think anybody would ever want to hear me talk, for sure. But
likewise,
it's interesting. Well, on that note, kind of looking back at some of the stuff that happened, in the past year, is there anything that sort of sticks out in your mind? Any episodes that you particularly remember?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. As far we kind of try to hit some news and stuff along the way when there's stuff that we feel like's worthy of talking about. And the biggest thing I think that came out of this last year industry wise was Crucible closing its doors, which is definitely having an impact on the industry. I think the biggest impact when it's all shakes out here is just basically the fact that we've got we cannot get the steels that we all use made in the U.S. anymore, which so that sucks, but maybe over time that will change again. But I guess the good news is we can still get them, And if there's any other light there, is that it's not like it's China that's making the steel now. It's at least another, friendly country that, we're good trade partners with and that kind of stuff. So it makes me feel a little better that it's not at least not coming from a communist enemy of the state. But
Yeah.
I think another big one for me was starting to interview things. That's starting out of the gate with Ernie. That was that was pretty phenomenal. That was really cool.
Definitely enjoyed that, and definitely enjoyed talking with Bobby. And I know you had Amy on at one point, and when I wasn't here to talk with her and get her side of some of the things. And it's cool to see different perspectives and different hear all these stories of people coming up through the through our industry, because we all take a different path. It's it's just like life itself. I mean, we all kind of just find our path and we go on right through it. So I definitely enjoyed those. Particular episode in general, I don't know. I think one of my favorites was the Can't Never Could episode that we did early on, where it was sort of just because that's sort of a motto I've always been drilled into my head by my dad. And so to kind of talk about that a little bit in terms of something else that was sort of drilled into me was knives, sort of make that connection. I definitely enjoyed that one, even though it was more of a rant. I've also enjoyed a lot of the, sort of technical stuff, like talking about detents and lockup and, some of that sort of stuff, so we can kind of put a little more information out there. So that's some of the stuff I've enjoyed.
Yeah, and I would agree.
And the Freak of the Week segment is probably my favorite thing we've done so far, being able to just shine a light on makers doing good things. I always enjoy doing that. I always enjoy sharing other people's posts. Even for a long time, I was sort of weird about putting other people's stuff on my Instagram page because I didn't want people to be confused or, that kind of stuff. But it's usually cleared up pretty simply. It's like, no, hey, this is another guy doing this, doing good work. Click on the picture, go to his page, check him out. And always happy to do that. Now, glad I kind of got over that hump and decided to start doing that, because it's I get a ton of help from starting with you, and then on down the line, the maker friends I've met and other mentors and other stuff like that. So really enjoy the Freak of the Week segment a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's been a good segment. Probably haven't stayed on top of it as much as we should have, but I do think it's a good one. Always a little difficult to feel like there's so many good people out there. Then it's kind of like when you're thanking people, when you're the people that are at award ceremonies and thanking people, like you always don't want to leave somebody out or whatever and hurt somebody's feelings, but because there are tons of good people out there doing really good work. So that is a very cool
I've got
segment.
a list of them on my phone. I just always I don't know, for some reason I forget until we get in here. They're like, oh yeah, I probably should have wrote that down and learned some stuff about that person this week, and actually talked about it. But there's a ton of people I want to highlight and showcase and all that. But just because I left them out doesn't mean anything. And just I have the attention span of a squirrel. That's mostly it. But
yeah, it goes back to what we were saying a minute ago about us. This is a very much little extra thing that we do on the side, that because to do stuff like that, it requires a little bit of homework to do it right, and then that's sometimes just time that we don't really have, so when you're already trying to balance the kind of work life that we have with some family life and that kind of stuff, it's just it can be hard to find time to do other homework in there too. So not that we don't want to highlight people, just sometimes there's not enough time in the day.
Yeah, very much. And other times, we get talking and all of a sudden I'm like, well, we didn't quite have time for that one this week. I'll get it next week. That's happened a few times as well. But
somebody tends to just start rambling and time goes away. I don't know who that would be, but
I didn't say nothing.
I can own it. I've been that way a long time. So
well,
no sense in changing now.
yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I believe you had a sticking point you wanted to discuss.
Yeah. So actually, it came to mind because I was looking back through the episodes and I was looking at some of the ones you were talking about that were like the technical stuff that we had gone over, and I was thinking, I was like, just like you, I was like, I really like when we can go over actual technical stuff that I feel like maybe helps the people they're listening and watching. And I was like, what have we not really talked about? And I thought about Lockstick. Also, partially because we just had an email about it a couple of days ago. And to be honest with you, like we get very, very, very few emails anymore about Lockstick, which some people might find really surprising for those of you that are big fans of lock inserts that think that you have to have a lock insert to keep from having Lockstick. Um, Newsflash, if it's done right, that's not true. So at this point, we have, it's taken us some time. In the very beginning, like some of the way we were manufacturing things, it wasn't, we weren't doing as good a job, but we've learned and we've evolved. And at this point, we have almost no trouble with Lockstick. Now, I probably shouldn't say that because we'll probably get 10 freaking emails this week, but that's the way it seems to go. But we just don't have, like when they hit the inspection table, we check like you don't see. Now that's not to say they don't have a little bit of Lockstick when he first puts them together, when they're first assembled, but we know what to do typically to fix it. And so I'll go into that first, then I'm going to go into like the user end of it and what the most common cause is, at least with our knives. Now, that being said, there's some knives out there that may not be actually, there might actually be something wrong with the knife that's causing it to be more prone to have Lockstick. That is possible for that to happen. But
there's a lot of factors that go into it.
There's a lot of factors. We're going to get to, though, the number one thing that you can do as a user to try to avoid it and or fix it. It's like the first thing to try before you have to eliminate this before you decide if it's, actually something wrong with the geometry of the lock or something like that. So yes, lock geometry is a big part of it. We played around a whole lot till we finally found the lock geometry that we like. We found out a carbidizing method, which technically, number one, we bought a big industrial size carbidizer. So we're laying down a much thicker layer of carbidization than the little small ones like we started off with. Plus, we've learned that we carbidize them. There's actually one more step that it's not really proprietary, but I don't necessarily just want to put it out there either at this point, just because, I don't know, probably being a jerk by not doing it. But it's not something that's like a do it at home kind of thing anyway. This would be for like other makers. And if somebody wants to know, they can ask me and I'll tell them, but I'm not going to just advertise it. But we carbidize them really good one time. For two things, we carbidize them at a higher voltage where it's laying down more carbide, and then once we've done that, we go back over it with another layer turned way down. So we do it like 90% to start with, and then we go dial it back down to 10 and put another layer. That 10 voltage or 10%, whatever it is the lighter layer tends to be a little smoother, which obviously helps with the Lockstick. So, but then we actually, that's done before the knives are tumbled. Let me think. That's done in processing. Yes, that's done in processing before the knives get tumbled to soften them and all that, and the rest of the finishing where they get blasted and then retumbled for the finish and all that. So once they've had all that done to them, we actually repeat it again and put another layer on there. Actually, 2 layers, I guess, the heavy layer and the lighter layer again after, to kind of, for anywhere if it got blasted, hit with blast media when it was getting blasted or anything like that. So we actually go to a whole lot of trouble to make the lock face on the lock bar perform the way it's supposed to perform. like I said, and that goes all the way back to all the work we put in experimenting with different angles and stuff like that, and finding the right geometry that works well with the cutting the lock of the blade. And
real quick on the carbonizing, for those that have never carbonized anything, it's sort of not really, but I mean, it's sort of like, think about painting. Like you can see that layer laying down, and what he's talking about. Like think about when you're first painting a wall and it's white. You're just trying to cover a whole lot of ground. You're trying to eliminate the white with whatever color you're going down on. You're going back to, and then that second coat is sort of that cleanup, sort of nice and smooth, keep everything even, that sort of step. Am I right on?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Okay. Yeah, that's a good analogy. And two, for those of you that don't know what carbonizing is, basically it's essentially welding carbide onto the face of the titanium. So with the thing that we've got, the unit has you put a carbide rod in the end of it, and then you put a lead on onto the handle that you're carbonizing, and then when you touch it with that, when it's turned on, it's got kind of like a reciprocating, like jackhammer effect. The little rod, it like kind of jackhammers in and out, and you hit the face of it with that. So that's where it's a little different than welding. It's not like just a straight stick that you just touch to it. It actually like reciprocates, and that lays down a layer of carbide. It welds a layer of that carbide onto the face of the titanium, so that you don't have raw titanium touching raw steel. And so, like I said, we go multiple layers at different times in the process to end up with a lock face that's going to be durable and pretty close to stick free most of the time. So and that's a lot of people carbonize. I would say probably most of the people, I would think, that are doing straight without using an insert are carbonizing. However, I can say that moving up from the little kind of almost hobbyist level carbonizer that we had to the one that we've got now is definitely a big difference. So I see.
Calm down there, big spender.
Huh? Not throwing any shade.
I said,
at the
calm down.
I'm just telling you, having used. Yeah, we've done. I mean,
it
just puts down. Look, it puts down. Well, I've made thousands of knives, probably hundreds, if not thousands. All my customs were done with the smaller carbonizer and stuff, and then first probably
I
several
know
thousand.
I made at least
production.
Yeah, I made at least the first 1,000 Mac 2s with it. So right. Yeah, I know, but just wanted to throw that out.
We also always had more issues with lock stick during that time too. So I don't know that much of it was because of that, but yeah. Which that being said, you can, if you spend a whole bunch of time, you can still lay down a good bit of carbide with one of the smaller units as well. Just
I definitely think the unit that y'all have is definitely better than the one that I have. I mean, it's commensurate with the price, but it is definitely a more capable unit for doing more work. It's sort of like anything, I guess. I mean, I've got like a benchtop mill versus a full stand up Bridgeport mill.
Right.
Like there's levels.
Right.
But just I wanted to kind of explain the carbonizing, kind of paint a picture, I guess, literally, what we were talking about.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And before we get completely off of it, this, I made a whole lot of knives, customs and stuff. And it's not like every knife we made in the beginning was sticky. We didn't have, I think it was probably more due to the geometry and stuff of the locks than it was, because we were also using flat locks at the time. We weren't cutting radius locks on the blades. Yeah. We were cutting them flat, and I think that probably had more to do with it than the carbonizer. But it's you can certainly make a super high quality knife even with the smaller carbonizer. It takes a little more time and patience to get a really good coat of carbide laid down. But anyway, so that brings me to what you as a user, so assuming you've got a knife that has the geometry is right, has a good carbide layer on it, and all that, and it starts being sticky. 9.5 times out of 10, when we get a message about that anymore, it's because somebody has either intentionally put, or more often than not, has accidentally let oil get on the lock face. All right. And I'll be honest, when I first started doing this and locks were being sticky, I put oil on the lock face thinking, oh, well, that'll lubricate it. It'll make it, release easier. That should help with lock stick. I can't give you all the science behind it, but 1,000,000% oil on the lock face will make it sticky like faster than just about anything. And even if you don't think that you have, even if you can't see oil on the lock face, does not mean there's not oil in the pores of the lock face. So one problem you run into, number one, some people just slather the whole thing in oil and intentionally put it on there. But the other problem is that most of these higher quality, super scientific oils that we have now, like nano oil and all the different ones, they're actually made intentionally to spread into every little crack and crevice and all that. So you put a little oil around your pivot and a little oil there on your detent track and all that. If you're not very careful, it will, over time, it's going to kind of leach and run and end up on the lock face. And once it's in there, it's basically that it's still there unless you do something to clean it out. It doesn't just evaporate away and then it doesn't cause issues anymore. It's going to stay down in the pores. So what we do is use acetone. And acetone, I've had tons of people too that they'll email in and be like, having lock stick. We'll say, all right, clean it with acetone, and explain to them how to do it. And they come back and say, I cleaned it and it's still sticking. And like, did you clean it with acetone? No, I had rubbing alcohol. I used that. Not the same thing. Rubbing alcohol is better than nothing, but it does not have the same effect that acetone does from what we have found. So we use acetone, and what I normally do, you can usually do it without even necessarily taking the knife apart. But if you're going to really clean the lock face, it depends. If you can clean the tang of the blade for sure, the lock face of the blade, just holding it, let me get a knife out. Well, here's one. Holding it like this with it closed, and I mean the lock face is exposed right there. You just soak a Q-tip in acetone. Don't be shy with it. You want it to actually just soak the whole thing. So take it good bit of acetone on a Q-tip and scrub it, and then open and close it several times. Let it fully lock and unlock several times, and then repeat. Put more acetone on there. Do it again, and sometimes. I've seen it, do it once or twice, and you think surely there can't be any oil left on there, and it's still sticking a little bit, and then you do it a third or fourth time, and then magically all of a sudden it just goes away. It's just sometimes it takes a little bit to get all the acetone out of those little pores. And then another thing we do, it's easier if you've got the knife apart, but you can take look here, I've got a sample laying right here. You can take if it's apart, the lock face of the actual lock bar too, because that carbonization that we were just talking about, even though we do that smoother finish we were talking about, it's still a very porous finish on there, and that oil really likes to get in there and stick. So if you've got the knife taken apart, you can do the exact same thing. Q-tip, lots of acetone on it, scrub it several different times, let it completely evaporate, hit it again, and then if you can't really access that part of it when the knife is assembled. But what we do sometimes, if it's not real bad, is actually just I'll get a Q-tip completely soaked in acetone, and then on the space in the lock bar, where the lock cut is, I'll just take and press that Q-tip on it and let all that acetone run down across the lock face. And sometimes that can be a quick fix if you don't have time or whatever to actually take the knife apart. If it's really bad, you may have to take it apart and actually scrub it with a Q-tip. But probably at least 50% of the time or more, just scrubbing the actual lock face of the blade, the lock cut on the blade will do it. And then when you open and close it several times, if you'll open and close it while that acetone is still wet on there and it hasn't evaporated yet, it'll actually be getting on the lock face of the titanium and helping to get it off of there too. So if you do that close enough, Chase, I think it was when you were still here, we developed what we call the acetone bomb, where we would basically, we would take, either a Q-tip like I was talking about, or even take essentially like we had these little like squeeze bottles that you could do, but almost like a little cap full of acetone and just dump it in there and let it just get in there on everything, like so it just gets to all the surfaces. And it was amazing how often that would work when all else failed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
100%.
Yeah. So
yeah,
cleaning both surfaces that come into contact with each other with acetone really well, and sometimes multiple times. It's not always going to get all of it out on the first try, because acetone evaporates really quickly. And so I think a lot of times what happens is you're scrubbing it and it's just evaporating so quickly that you're just not getting all of it, out of there. Kind of back to like your reference with the paint too. Like if you get some paint on the floor, you're not always going to be able to take a paper towel and just get it all up in one swipe. Sometimes you got to go back and 2 or 3 times get a fresh paper towel and keep going until you get all of it up. Same kind of concept. Sometimes it takes a few times to really get in all those pores and get all that out of there. But
yeah, I think what happens a lot of times, if there's like a whole bunch of oil, when you put that, Q-tip down in there and, get it out, like, that oil is being soaked up into that Q-tip, but also the acetone in the Q-tip is still fighting it. So it's still trying to get out, and you've got a Q-tip loaded with oil and acetone if you keep going back with that same end of the Q-tip.
Yeah.
Versus, getting a new one or flipping it around and, getting it out of there.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. It's definitely better to use a fresh Q-tip end every time for, each different time you do it or whatever. I mean, Q-tips are cheap, so.
I'm sure someone would want to know, because I kind of want to know. Could you show the knife you were demonstrating on camera a little bit?
So this is one of the original. This is an original Dixon custom. Yeah. I say original. It's the custom design. So
yeah,
that I happen to have.
I figured somebody would want to know in the comments.
Talk about right now. Yeah, yeah, you're probably right. So yeah, I don't know what year this one was from. Probably,
I think 15 or 16, but could be wrong.
Yeah, probably somewhere right in there. Probably 15 or 16. This was well into making them. It's a little closer to the current Dixon, other than size, than some of them were in the very beginning. It's got the more contoured handles and stuff. But anyway, so yeah. So lock stick, yeah. Oil is not your friend when it comes to lock stick. And even if you think that you didn't put oil on a lock face, if you oiled your knife, you probably have oil on the lock face. It happens.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and it's like
oiling. Yeah, sorry. If you're oiling the detent ball or track, that runs directly down onto the lock face, and so I mean, you're dragging your balls across it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
hard to not get.
It's right there.
It's hard to not get oil on the face when you're dragging your balls across it.
Exactly. So
it's been a year. We kept it pretty clean. I guess we're going where things are de-escalating now.
Yeah, but the other considerations in lock stick and lock, that sort of stuff, is the lock surface in terms of not just like on the titanium side, like he was talking about, trying to make it smoother on the carbonization front, but also on the like when you grind the actual lock face of the blade,
right.
Like using too coarse of a grit versus using too fine of a grit can affect lock stick and or lock slip. Lock faces can be too fine and not really have anything for the lock face to grab onto. Even if the geometry is right, it can be just sort of too slippery for it to actually have anything to grab onto. Usually there's some other factors within that too. Depends on lock bar pressure. With enough lock bar pressure, I think you could do just about anything, but that also has adverse effects in terms of detent and other stuff like that. But I bring that up because I actually had one come back this week due to basically the lock face being too polished. and it wasn't initially. Whenever I cut it, it was with a fresh 220, so it was pretty coarse. But I did what I call a rumbled finish on this blade, and that's basically hand rubbing the blade, trying to hand rub it, and then getting frustrated because I can't make the hand rub look as good as I want, and so tossing it in the tumbler and letting it tumble for a long time. That's what my rumbled finish is. It's because I am not happy with any hand rub basically ever. So I end up tossing it in the tumbler and call it rumbled, and it sort of blends things better, and it's a little bit different of a finish. But to do that finish, it has to stay in the tumbler for a while. And as I think we've talked about on here before, tumbling is basically polishing. It's it's just in there smoothing out all the pores in the steel and just rubbing everything, and making it essentially burnished, or essentially burnishing the surfaces of the steel. And so what happened was I tumbled it and did all that, and I had checked it for lock stick and lock slip and all that, and I'm guessing either it was not slipping when it left, but it had sort of polished itself more after being flipped open a bunch of times, and it got to where it was basically you could hit it on your hand and it was falling. I was like, that's not right. Luckily it was a local-ish guy who lives about an hour away, and I was able to pick up the knife from him and get it back to the shop. And basically all I did was re-hit the lock face on a used 120 grit belt, so it wasn't super coarse. Usually I find that 120 is a bit too coarse if you use like a fresh 120, but like a used 120 isn't quite so harsh. And so I did that, and that was the only thing I really did as far as actual changes to it. And I kept the knife with me for, I think, 4 days. Just I would be doing something else, walk over, flip it open, spine whack it 3-4 times, close it, put it down, and it hadn't failed since. So I basically bring all that up to basically say that I don't know that the I guess the two sides of stick and slip. I guess there's a fine line you're treading between. Okay, this is too hard to disengage and too hard to open versus this closes way too easily, and that now my fingers are in danger. So yeah,
that speaks to what we were saying at the beginning of the lock stick conversation, was that there are things in the manufacturing that can make them more prone to having stick and stuff. But always the first option, if you're having trouble, is to do the acetone cleaning and then go from there. I definitely would not, and I want to say this as a disclaimer, just because I know how people's minds work, because that's the way mine would work. Because if I just heard you talk about what you just talked about, and then I had one that was sticking, then I don't want somebody being like, oh, well, I can just polish the lock face a little bit more and it won't be sticky anymore. I'd highly do not recommend that. And if it's on one of ours, then you're going to void the warranty for like you do any kind of polishing, material removal, whatever on the lock faces for sure. And I'd say for probably anybody else too. And you're putting yourself in danger.
With any sort of abrasive, I don't don't. I don't.
Yeah.
Don't grab some 220 out of your toolbox and don't.
Yeah, you're it's way too likely that you may end up causing it to slip and end up cutting yourself. Also, you would not believe how little material it takes to remove from a lock face to make your lockup go from right where you want it to late. So it's I for multiple reasons, safety being the main one, I definitely do not recommend, clean it with that. That's why basically what this whole conversation is about, is giving you something that you can do to try first. Clean it really, really good, like more than you think it could possibly need with acetone. If it's still sticking, then contact the manufacturer and see what they can do about it. But that's the first thing. Like that's one of the things I would recommend for semi-regular knife maintenance is to use acetone to clean both surfaces of the lock. One more thing that I would recommend that we've started doing in the shop is we don't really use oil anymore. We use wax. And I actually think that it makes them slicker. I think it makes the action feel, even if possible, a tiny bit more slick than it was before. It definitely didn't lose anything. I can guarantee you that. And obviously you don't want to get wax on the surface of the lock either, but it doesn't run like, unless you get it heated up to the point that you're liquefying it or whatever. And we're not talking about gobs of wax either, guys. We're talking about like a very thin film. That, especially like he was talking about for the detent ball and stuff, detent track, because you can actually put a thin film of wax there and you don't have to worry about it running down on the lock face. So that was actually, I think, one of the other reasons that we've cut down so much on any lock stick once they actually get to the customer, because I know before we would try to be very careful. We would teach everybody, okay, the tiniest drop of nano oil that you can possibly put on there, like that's how much to put. But even with that, we put them together. They sit in a box for, a few days or whatever. They go to a dealer. They might be in a box and they're transporting between us, the dealer, the customer, getting turned every which way. Like inevitably, some of them would end up with some oil on the lock face because of that. Because again, that you're introducing oil into the area that's close to the part that doesn't need oil, and that oil is made to run and get in every crack and crevice it can get to. And it's going to happen sometimes. So wax for us has been a much better solution. It's just as slick, if not more slick, seems to last just as long, if not longer, and doesn't cause the issues with lock stick that oil seems to. So there's a little
I've
bonus
been meaning to try
recommendation
that
there.
since you told me about it, but I keep just using oil and doing old dog same tricks sort of thing. So I need to actually
I'd
try
highly
that
recommend it.
out. And back to the sort of user, I guess, the one thing you can do really, we talked about the thing you can do for the lock stick, but for a lock slip, there's not a whole lot you can do really. The one and only check I would say, and this is what I asked my customer the other day, the one and only question I asked him was, is the pivot tight? Do you have any lateral blade play? Like, is the pivot tight? Because if you don't have your pivot tight, if you've loosened it up to make the action more fall shutty, and then you have lock issues, that's on you. Because it's made to have everything lined up in that area. That pivot area is important. That is a critical dimension. We need everything lined up and staying exactly where it is for all of those things to work properly. Yes, you can loosen it and have a little bit of, more free fall, shutty, sort of action, but, not saying I won't fix it. But first thing to do if you have lock slip or, anything like that or lock issues, make sure your pivot is tight and you don't have any lateral blade play. And beyond that, contact the maker.
Yep. And when you said that about loosening the pivot, that to me, that's kind of like, that's basically as dumb as, and when we say, I'm saying loosening it to the point that there's lateral blade play, like right up to the point that there's there's zero lateral blade play, you're pretty much okay. But you get it where there's any lateral blade play, that's basically just as dumb as like not tightening your lug nuts on your wheels all the way down. Same kind of principle. Like it's going to cause issues. It's made to stay straight and move in this direction, being held, perfectly upright or whatever. It's made to work like that. When you start adding wiggle in there, it starts causing all kinds of problems. So that's basically just as dumb as loose lug nuts. So don't do it.
And when I said, it's on you, like not saying, we as the manufacturers won't fix the problem, but that's going to be the first thing. Like, I think I've told this story before, but like we would get one in, for whatever warranty issue, and you were over there messing with it at your desk, and you opened it up, and I said, pivot's loose, and I'm on the other side of the shop. I could hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I could hear how loose the pivot was from the sound of it.
Yep.
And like, so that's going to be the first check that we, do, is tightening that pivot back up and seeing, is the issue still there? So, I mean, instead of, contacting us, contacting whoever it may be, first thing you can do is just, make sure the pivot is tightened to the appropriate amount. Not saying you have to crank it down, but just make sure it's tight and still holding it where it's not having lateral blade play.
Yep, agreed. All right, well, I think we're already at a little over an hour here. I think we've done pretty good. Chase and I were, other than weekly review and knowing that this was a year into the podcast here, we didn't really have one big subject to talk about today, so we weren't sure how long this was going to go. But as usual, we've managed to chit chat enough to make it for a full hour. So,
indeed.
I think, have you got anything else that was kind of top of your mind?
No, not really. Just again, thank you guys for supporting us for this full year. Looking forward to going into the new year and seeing what we come up with in there. And yeah, we're going to be getting into the holidays soon, so we're probably going to do some possibly little themed episodes on that. And otherwise, we'll see you next week.
Yep, sounds good. And like you said, guys, we do greatly appreciate you. At the same time, we would greatly appreciate all the support we continue to get. If you're listening and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. We always appreciate comments, reviews, especially on the audio side. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple or somewhere, that helps a lot. Helps the algorithm, helps us out. So we greatly appreciate it. While we, just like we said, we're not, we're doing this kind of for fun / informational, something for you guys, but we do want to do well at it. I like to do well at anything that I do, so we'd love to see the podcast grow and continue to do well and continue to get bigger. So do us a favor and help us out with that. We appreciate it, and do still send in questions or comments or whatever. You can put comments in the YouTube description, or you can email them to
knifefreakshow@gmail.com with one S.
There you go. So either way, we'd love to hear from you guys, and we appreciate you and hope you have a great week.
And let your freak flag fly.